Hey there, boss witches. Welcome to the Planetary Pulse, where we're going to cover the astrology for the week of May 24th through the 30th so you can flow in your business and your life. So, this week is not so busy in terms of the number of transits we're experiencing, but do not let that fool you because what's happening here is slow, deep, transformation. And it's like being in a pressure cooker. Maybe you're being asked to sit with something that you'd really rather just scroll past. So let's talk about it. So, most people treat these intense transits like Mars square Pluto, for example, which we are going to be talking about today, as something to white knuckle through, like you are on a turbulent flight where you just grip the armrest and hope for the best. But I have spent years watching these exact patterns come up again and again and play out in the lives of the coaches and the spiritual entrepreneurs I work with, as well as in my personal life. We'll get more into that later as well. And what actually supports us when we go through these intense moments isn't bracing, it's getting curious and it's being really compassionate, giving yourself that spaciousness to process. So by the end of this video, you are going to have a practical, grounded way of working with this week's energy instead of just being dragged around by it. So I'm going to walk you through every transit active this week, which one is stirring up things in your life, in your business, what it's doing here. And I'm going to close with a journal prompt to help you point all of that intensity somewhere it can actually support you in your growth. So the vibe for the week. Again, like I said, light on the number of transits, but really heavy on the depth. So this week is good for going in and not spreading yourself out thin. There's a couple of powerful square aspects happening between planets. And a square aspect is a 90-degree angle between the planets, and it corresponds with the energy of Mars. And so there's this friction, there's this pressure that's happening between two different planetary energies. Each planet wants something specific. It has an agenda, some way that it likes to express itself, and it's bumping heads with an opposing force. And this can be exhausting, it can be frustrating. And again, when we come at it with curiosity and compassion, this can actually be a really productive tension when we meet it with that mindset. So let's enter this week less like we are going into battle and understand that we're just being squeezed a little bit. And sometimes that feels good to be squeezed, right? And what is probably going to be getting squeezed out is the truth within yourself, within your relationships. And the through line this week is asking, what do you truly value? And are you actually willing to fight for it? So again, approach this week with compassion, curiosity, and you can come out the other side, maybe feeling a little tender, but feeling some transformation and some growth in your business and in your soul evolution. So let's break down the week transit by transit, and then we're going to go deep dive into the biggies. So starting on May 24th, we are in a Virgo moon. We've just come off that first quarter moon in Virgo, and we're going to be in this waxing gibbous phase of the moon all week. So things are growing, momentum is building. Coming off that first quarter moon, maybe something has been adjusted, you've done a kind of course correction, and now you're ready to move forward with that refinement. You've made the pivot, and now you get to grow from it. We are also having on May 24th, the sun at 3 degrees of Gemini is sextile Neptune in Aries. And this is a nice, soft, imaginative, dreamy vibe. And it can soften some of the fast moving ideas that have been coming through in this Gemini season. So This is a great day to move through some of those ideas and let them move around in a creative way. So maybe rather than getting really strategic, write a post that you channeled, go live and let things just flow and just let those ideas kind of lead you down a path like you're floating down a river. So moving to May 25th, this is going to be a high intensity point potentially. So first we have the sun in Gemini at 4 degrees square the north node, square both nodes. Actually, whenever a planet is squaring the nodes, it's squaring both the north and the south nodes. So this can feel like fated. Something fated is happening here. There's this tension between the sun and the nodal axis, and it can feel like this crossroads moment. So something you do or a decision you make may have more reach than it appears. That may kind of circle back in eclipse season later this summer. So pay attention, write down in your journal something that may seem small at the moment, but just notice how it takes you down a new path. And so also on May 25th, we've got Mars at 5 degrees of Taurus square Pluto in Aquarius. And so this is a big one, and we're going to cover this more in depth after the week review. May 26th, the moon moves into Libra, and this shift is bringing us a desire for beauty, balance, connection. This is also going to be the day that the sun in Gemini trines Pluto. And so there's this nice relational quality to the clarity that's coming through. So checking in during this moon phase about what needs to come back into balance in your partnerships, in your collaborations. So again, we've got the sun trine Pluto that day. This is a lovely little transit to follow that Mars square Pluto, and we're going to go deeper on that as well in its own section. May 28th, the moon moves into Scorpio right as the Venus square Saturn transit's happening, which is poetic. Scorpio doesn't do surface level, and neither does that Venus Saturn tension. Feelings might get intense again. And again, it's that honesty that wants to come through that you just can't avoid during this period. So let yourself be in that honest space, particularly in your intimate relationships and in your own self. So the Venus square Saturn at 11 degrees of Cancer and Aries, this is where your values are getting a reality check. And it's like that friend who loves you and loves you enough to ask you that hard question and really show you that blind spot. So we're going to go deeper into that as well. And so this whole waxing gibbous week is going to be bringing us next week into that full moon in Sagittarius on May 31st. So you're going to want to come back for that, because after a week of pressure and power struggles and reality checks, this full moon is going to want to help you expand and celebrate and find meaning in all of it. So make sure you come back for that one. It's going to be a good one. Okay. So we've got the overview, we've got the vibe. Now let's go deep, because that's what this week is asking us for. So Mars in Taurus square Pluto in Aquarius. What are you actually fighting for? Mars in Taurus, we've got this happening in fixed signs. So there's this slow, stubborn energy that, can be maybe frustrating, maybe really supportive in something that takes that kind of determination to build. When Mars is in Taurus, when it digs its heels in, it is not moving. It is that's the fight energy that Mars has in Taurus. It's like, I am planting my feet in the ground and you cannot move me. And then we've got Pluto in Aquarius, which is in this process of excavating the underbelly of our ideals, asking what's underneath this vision you have. What have you been hiding from yourself? And noticing the gap between what we say we believe and what we actually do. So coming together, they are creating this pressure around power, around hidden motivations, whether that's in yourself or in your relationships, in your audience, in your clients, and the truth that is running the show that maybe we haven't looked directly at. So this is a transit that will not let things stay surface level. And while it can feel deeply uncomfortable, it can be really painful. Ultimately, this is a part of our soul growth and coming into greater alignment with what we truly value. So, a concept that came to mind when I was feeling into this transit is this idea of positive obsession. And I kind of heard this through a Gemini way where I was listening to this podcast with Adrienne Marie Brown. The podcast is How to Survive the End of the World. Great podcast. And she's a huge Octavia Butler fan, which I am as well. And so I believe the concept comes from Octavia Butler, and it's called just like positive obsession is the concept. And so it's like Mars and Pluto is creating this obsessive quality where you're so driven by something that you're so passionate about. And of course, obsession can get very problematic when it's directed toward things that are more destructive. And positive obsession is like, what are you so obsessed with, so dedicated to, that you're just going to keep going? So it might be your business and like really feeling into that Pluto and Aquarius, like what is the power of my vision in my business? And then that Mars and Taurus gives you a lot of endurance to just keep going with it. So Pluto is here to transform, to take us through that death rebirth process. Mars gives us the will to act. And so together they are a forge, and they are building our muscles and our capacity to move through the uncomfortable truth potentially. So, personal share. In my chart, my natal Venus is in Taurus, opposite Pluto and Scorpio, early degrees. So, I have been going through this super intense years long transit, still very much active, with Pluto square my natal Pluto, transiting Pluto also square my natal Venus. And every time Mars and Pluto would come together during this transit, I would just get knocked on my ass. And like this whole thing has been about me coming back into my own power, my own truth in my relationships. And part of that process has been like these secrets surfacing, these hard truths arriving like a ton of bricks. And it's been really messy. And, this transit is still active for me, but I've moved through like the Mars Pluto activations enough times now over these past couple of years, and I've shown up for it. I've made really hard decisions that feel like my whole life had fallen apart. And now I'm in a place where I can say, okay, Mars and Pluto are coming back. And I understand that, things might get stirred up again. And I am learning to come back to my own source of power, personal power and groundedness. So coming to these transits consciously with awareness, while it still may be really activating, really triggering, there may be a lot of chaos happening around you. But when you come to it with awareness of these kind of like patterns coming through and what they're trying to teach us, that then allows a little more space, a little more compassion, maybe a touch more wisdom about how to move through this, and also this understanding that like, okay, every time I've gotten to the other side of this challenging transit, I came a little bit closer to my inner truth. Thanks for listening to my all of that pour out. And so it's really about coming through this with conscious awareness. And the question for this week is not how do I get through this, although that can be part of it, certainly. Part of it is giving yourself compassion, more rest, more grace. But ultimately, on a larger level, it's what's being clarified in me right now, what's being transformed. Okay, so the next day we get the Sun in Gemini trine Pluto. And this feels like kind of like a relief after such an intense transit. And that Gemini sun and a supportive trine to Pluto and Aquarius feels like a little bit of a window in our mind opening. And it's kind of beautiful, the timing. And I feel like it's offering a new mindset that is accessible to you if you are paying attention, keeping an open mind. So watch for an unexpected thought that reframes what felt really hard under the Mars square Pluto transit, or a shift in how you're holding something, even if it's just internally in yourself. Because what you move through consciously, you integrate, and what you move through unconsciously, you repeat. So this feels like an opportunity to break a pattern, to do it differently next time. Okay, so then we get another intense aspect happening with the Venus in Cancer square Saturn in Aries. So, Venus in Cancer is all about magnetizing your soul family, your sense of home and belonging. It's tender and relational and protective of the people you love, of what you value. And Saturn in Aries is coming in the superior square, and it's asking you to stand up for what you value, for drawing a line and making a stand for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. And so Saturn here is asking you to stop shrinking and to stop tolerating things that are draining your energy. So something we can think about in our business, how do our values play out in our business and in the ways that we are relating to our audience, to our clients, to our collaborators? And Saturn is asking you, is in alignment with your values, or do you need to set a boundary here? What platforms are you spending your energy that don't actually align with how you want to do business? Personally, I am in a process of moving from Meta and into platforms where I am able to get that connection and real human conversation that isn't part of a business whose values I don't feel aligned with. Another place that the Saturn Venus square might be asking you about is, what is your pricing saying about how much you're willing to advocate for yourself or step into your authority? So let's say you need 5,000 live comfortably and to be able to show up to your relationships, to your clients, to everything else that happens in your business and your life. And you're charging $50 a session. So that math has consequences, right? How many clients do you need to see, and how much work do you need to put in to get all of those clients in just to make that number work in your life? So Saturn is asking you to really take a hard look at that. And, where are you giving your energy to relationships or systems that aren't really giving much back? There might be a reality check there. So the invitation here is to look at where flow and beauty might be obstructed and make a clear, decisive action to move through that and make a change. Okay, so this whole week is all about how not to escape the intensity, but how to channel it for your personal growth, for your business growth. That Mars squares Pluto is asking you to get into an obsession that of a larger vision, a larger mission. So when we scatter our energy this week, that pressure has nowhere to actually build. So my journal prompt for you is, where do you consciously want to direct this intensity this week? So pick one thing, a project, a decision, a conversation that if you really went all in, could shift something real, and then let yourself go there. So this week is for the thing that maybe you've been circling, and now it's time to dive right into the center. All right. So thank you so much for being here. If this is the kind of work and community and connection you want more of, that, being in a co-creative relationship with the cosmic energy as, astrology as a real practical lens for building a business that matches your values, I want to personally invite you to the Boss Witch Collective on School. This is a community for spiritual entrepreneurs who want the cosmic context and the strategy in the same place with people who get it. So the link is below. And when you join, you'll get immediate access to my Moon Magic to Grow Your Sacred Business video training. And before you go, drop a comment and tell me, what's this Mars square Pluto moment for you this week? What's it bringing up? What are you fighting for? What are you obsessed with? I would love to know, and I read every single one. All right, take good care of yourself this week, and I'll see you on the next one.